Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we had that Final Fantasy VII anniversary event yesterday, and we'll take a look at what announcements came out of that, as well as Capcom making the decision to let you have your older versions of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7. We have those topics and more to cover, but before we get started, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so we can keep you up to date with all the gaming news. Now let's get started. So we had that Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary stream and have quite a bit of information coming out of that. First, they showed some scenes from Final Fantasy VII Integrate and announced that this will be coming to Steam on June 17th. Now I believe it's been on Epic Games Store for a while, but now you'll be able to actually play it on a Steam Deck. They also announced some merch that you're going to be able to pre-order now, and then they covered some mobile game related to updates for Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier. Now I've not played that, so I don't know a whole lot about it, but you can check that out if you're interested. And then they also showed what looked like a new version of Final Fantasy VII, and it looked to be like the original and more of a one-to-one remake rather than the remake that we got. However, then they announced at the end that it's coming to mobile and called Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. So I hope something like this might come to the Switch eventually, and I'm not sure if this is going to be a free game or if it's going to be something you have to pay for, but I guess we'll find out. And then they announced what's been leaked out for a day or so now, Final Fantasy Crisis Core Reunion. So this is a remake of the original Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, and this looks very similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake, so they probably have this set in the same universe. And that'll be coming this winter to PS4, PS5, Xbox Series systems, Xbox One, Steam, and believe it or not, Switch. So I have to wonder if that might end up being a streaming version. Who knows, maybe they might have it on a Switch Pro. But at any rate, that's coming this winter. And then they had what I would say is the bigger announcement, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now this is the part 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that's going to be coming next winter on the PS5. Now they announced this is part 2 of 3, so that means the Final Fantasy VII Remake games are going to be a trilogy. So all this is pretty exciting, and I have to wonder more about that one-to-one remake of Final Fantasy VII that's going to mobile devices. I really do hope that this gets a release, maybe at least on the Switch. I'm sure the Switch could handle it. Next, it looks like we have a collection of Atari games coming out to the Switch, PC, and the Atari VCS. We have this headline here from Famitsu, 150 microgame collection Atari Mania announced for Switch, PC, and Atari VCS due out this summer. Now before you get too excited and thinking, oh man, I'd love to play some of these old Atari games, well, this isn't exactly that. We have the announcement here from the publisher and developer Illogica. As we celebrate Atari's 50th anniversary, Atari Mania gives fans a way to re-engage with their favorite Atari games and characters, while also introducing a new generation to the games that launched the industry. Atari Mania takes the elements of an Atari classic, incredibly fun, fast-twitch gameplay, and mixes them with the self-referential humor and over-the-top joy of a company celebrating 5 decades of amazing experiences. And the description of the game says it's going to be 150 microgames inspired by the breadth of Atari's decades-spanning catalog. So this isn't an Atari collection, but more or less kind of a mix-up of some different Atari game elements. So I'll have to wait and see what the reviews are for this. Right now all we have is coming this summer, so we don't have an exact date. But it will be interesting to find out how they kind of poke fun at some of their gameplay. I have to wonder if E.T. is going to be featured in this. So earlier this week at that Capcom showcase, we got information that there would be upgraded versions of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7. Well, for some people, that's not a good thing. We have this headline here from IGN. Capcom reverses Resident Evil PC upgrade decision after overwhelming community response. Players can now choose between the original release and the upgrade. Now, as someone who mostly games on consoles, it didn't make sense to me at first as to why someone would want the older versions of these games, but this article explains it well. The updated versions that lined up with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series upgrades being released added ray tracing and enhanced 3D audio, but also raised the system requirements and caused performance issues for some users, causing many players to call for a choice to return to the old versions. Now, I'm glad that people have this option now. It would be pretty bad to own a game that plays perfectly fine on your PC, and it gets a forced upgrade, and now you're forced to upgrade your hardware to play it again. So I'll give kudos to Capcom for making this decision that I see as something pretty consumer friendly. Finally, let's take a look at the latest Famitsu Sales coming out of Japan. First, looking at the software sales, we have two new entries here. Coming in first place, we have a Demon Slayers game that was originally released on PlayStation, so this is kind of a late port for it, but does a pretty strong release. And then we have Mario Strikers Battle League, which is the other new release here, only doing about a third of what the Demon Slayers game did. And then as we go down the list, we have Nintendo Switch Sports, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Mario Kart 8, Minecraft, Ring Fit Adventure, and then for the PS5 we have Gran Turismo 7, then Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and finally at number 10 we have the e-baseball game. Now, I'm not sure what gave Gran Turismo 7 a boost this week. I know there was a movie announced, but I kind of doubt that would have bumped it up. I wonder if there was a sale on this game in Japan that moved it up so much. Now let's take a look at the hardware sales. We have the Switch and Switch OLED in the top two spots, with the PlayStation 5 coming in there, breaking up the Switch monopoly with the Switch Lite coming in behind. And then we have a strong performance for the Xbox Series S, and then number 6, the Xbox Series X, and then the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition coming in at number 7. And on a side note, the Switch has hit 25 million sales lifetime in Japan, which is a pretty good milestone, which means it outsold the PlayStation 2 in Japan and is still behind the DS, Game Boy and Game Boy Color as one group, and the 3DS. And the Switch will probably surpass the 3DS before the end of the month. Now it has a little ways to go before it beats the DS and Game Boy/Game Boy Color, but if we get something like a Switch Pro and they consider it part of the same family, then I see it surpassing all of those and becoming the best-selling hardware in Japan of all time. And that's all we have for today. Did anything we cover catch your attention? Are you a PC gamer, and are you glad Capcom is giving you the option of being able to play the older version of these Resident Evil games? And do you think the Switch will eventually be the best-selling console in Japan of all time? Now, just a programming note, next week I'm not going to be able to do any news videos because I'm not going to be available, but I will have something posting each day, and it's basically a playthrough of a game that I'm hoping you enjoy. If everything works out well, I have a special guest on, and this will be a pretty fun playthrough, so I hope you enjoy it. But make sure to drop a comment about any of the topics we've covered today, and I hope you all have a great weekend and a great next week, and be good.